So welcome back to tomorrow's teaching. We are talking about Python, and I wanted to add something to our discussion of dictionaries from the last session. Dictionaries are the kind of thing that is a little difficult for the beginner to see the point of, because they are particularly useful for bigger programs that have more complex needs to represent data. As long as you are adding two numbers or, making a division or doing other such simple tasks, you don't need a dictionary. The dictionary becomes important when you are handling bigger amounts of data. For example, let's say you are dealing with a hotel booking system. And if you think about how to represent people in a hotel, then the first thing, of course, is you have the people. So your hotel guests all have a name. They also have an age. This is important for a hotel because children, for example, don't pay or they pay less. So you need to know if your customers are, grown up and can book a room by themselves. So somehow you need to keep track of the age. You need to keep track of the name. You might have a field in your database that is for the passport number or ID number so that you can identify your guests if there is an legal problem. And then you have multiple people per room that need to be stored, and often you won't know how many. There might be, a variable number, 1 guest, 2, 3, 4, 5. I mean, there's a physical limit to rooms, but still you don't know exactly how many people are going to be in a room. Then these people they move in and out. So you need to store the date of arrival and the date of departure so you can rent the room to another person after the first group has left. So all these things you need to store for a guest and then for a room. So the room has a number of guests and every guest has this personal data information attached to him. And then you also need to know when the guest arrives and leaves. And for this, you must devise some structure that allows the people at the reception to book rooms for guests, to mark them as now occupied, to find out which guests are in which room, and so on. And we will now not write the whole program, but I will show you the beginning of it, a rudimentary way of representing this data structure with lists and dictionaries. Let's have a look at this. So what you do here, the first thing is you have an empty list of rooms. And this is where our rooms will go. So we don't know how many rooms we have in this hotel yet. Perhaps you have a small hotel with only 5 rooms, or you have a big one with 200. So let's keep it as a list so that you can just append to the list without having to change your program. And then we have a list of guests. So here are the guests. The guests are people. They are not necessarily assigned to a room because they can move the room. So you don't want to store the room together with a person because then Andy would be, condemned to always be in room 5 and he would never move. So you want to have the people as people separate from the rooms. And so if your guest comes again next year, then you already have the database entry for him. You have his data. And then you don't need to enter them again. You don't need to enter his passport number again because you can say, oh, Mr. Andy, I know you. You have been here last year and I already have your passport number. So this is a good service. And therefore, we want to keep the guests separate from the rooms, entirely separate. And so here now I have a list of guests. So, of course, because I don't want now to write the whole program, I will not enter them through an interface where I ask to enter every single guest. I will just write them into my program. But you know already how to do that, right? You would have a kind of loop where I'm asking enter the guest's name, enter the guest's passport number, enter the guest's age, or press exit to continue. We've done this as an exercise before. So now here are my guests. I hard code them into the program. I have 4 guests, Andy, Helen, Mary, and Peter of various ages. And these are the people I am dealing with here, my guests that have been registered at my hotel at some point. And then I have rooms. And a room, if you think about it, consists of a room number. Of course, every room must have a unique number, otherwise we cannot find it. And it has occupation data. When do people arrive? When do people leave? And who are the guests? And now let's look at guests as a dictionary. You see that it is a list. It's not only a dictionary, because a dictionary keeps different kinds of data for the same piece of complex data. So a dictionary would be name, passport ID, age, and so on for one person. But now I want all my guests. So what I'm doing is to create a list of dictionaries. And this is something you have to get your mind around. It is a little complex the first time you see it, perhaps, but it is not hard to understand. You have a list of dictionaries. One dictionary is one person, and then you have multiple persons in a list. And guests now is my list. You see the square brackets that delimit the list. And inside the list, I have dictionary, comma, dictionary, comma, dictionary. You can see the curly brackets for each dictionary and the commas that separate them. And inside the dictionary, I have a key, name, age, and I have the data, the value that belongs to the key. Andy, Helen, Mary, Peter, and 55, 65, and 12. So this is how this is structured. It's a list of dictionaries, and every dictionary is one person, and every person has multiple keys and data, multiple fields, as we call them, right? Keys and values. A room now is only one piece of data. It's one room. So it's not a list yet. We will later have a list of rooms, but now it's only one room. So let's say I call this room 1. Again, I would normally enter my rooms through some kind of interface. But in this case, I want only 2 rooms. I don't want to type now to put 100 rooms in there. So we will have only 2 rooms. And I call them room 1 and another room. And so room 1 has a number. You see, this is a dictionary. It now has a field number, key number, and the value is 19. So this is a room number. We have an arrival, a departure date, and a list of guests. And the guests need to be a list because there can be multiple, an unknown number of guests, right? Can be from 1 to 6 or something. So I don't want to just write guest 1, guest 2, guest 3, and so on, hard-coded, because I would be wasting space if these guests don't exist. And then I could never add more. Perhaps at some point it's necessary to have 7 or 8. Perhaps it's my family coming to visit. There's only one room free. And because it's my family, I don't care. I just stuff everybody into one room. So then perhaps I have 7 people in a room. I don't want my program to not work, right? So we just leave it open. And with the dates also, storing the dates in the room is important because then I can always check if rooms are overbooked, if rooms are free, which dates are free. So it's very important to have the dates in a good format in there. Now the format for the dates, there are various ways you can write it. Python can parse dates in various formats. But if you want to deal rationally with dates, the best way is to do it like this. You have a string or a number. And this is in the form you see here, year, month, and day. This is the best way to represent it, the most rational way, because you can sort this numerically or as a string, and sorting it will automatically sort it correctly by date, because the year is the most significant part of the information than the month and the day. If you do it the other way around, day, month, year, or month, day, year, as the Americans do, you will not have an easy way of sorting these things with a simple sorting function alphabetically or by number, because then your day will be the most significant. So you will be sorting all the first days of the month together, regardless of the month, and all the Januaries together, regardless of the year. And this is not what you want, right? So sorting it in this reverse order is the easiest, and you should generally do this with dates. Okay, and then we have the guests, and the guest now is a list of guests. And every guest is himself, as you remember. Let's go up and look at it. Every guest is himself a dictionary. And they are all part of a list of guests. So guests is a list of dictionaries, right? And so this is why when I talk about guests here, I am making a list, and to this list I add the element 0 from my guest lists and the element 3 from my guests list. And the element 3, for example, is the dictionary with the name Peter and the age 12. Okay, so this is what's happening here. And again, this needs a little bit of meditation to sink in. It's not immediately obvious, but guests itself in room 1, this guests is a different guests from the guests, which is my global list of guests that are known. So these guests in room 1 are the guests in room 1. So there's no problem having a field named as another variable as long as it's clear what you mean. So the guests field in this room 1 dictionary contains a list of guests, and each element of a list is a guest. And this guest is a dictionary, which is itself a member of the list, global list of guests. And this is why all these brackets, curly and square, go there as they go. And you really have to try to understand how this works. So try to picture it, draw the list, and then see how this works. And then I have another room. Now I gave it another number, 2 or 1, whatever, just to show you that the number is some random number. You don't need to call them 1, 2, 3. Whatever you want is good enough. And then I have other arrival dates, and I have 2 different guests now sitting in this thing, Helen and Mary. And the way we structured this now is very flexible because you can now have the same guest occupying multiple rooms, right? You would just assign the same guest to multiple rooms, or you can have the same room having multiple guests, and you're not limited in what you can do with these data structures, how you can put the information in there. Now I created these 2 rooms, and now I want to append them to the still empty list of rooms. If you remember in the beginning, we created a list of rooms, but we have not put any rooms in there yet. So this is what we're doing now. Rooms.append, this is the method append of the room object. You remember this? We talked about methods, right, of lists. Room is a list, so it has an append method that appends a room to it. And I append room 1. And room 1 is itself, and then, another room. And these rooms are themselves dictionaries that contain different fields of key value, and also the values themselves can be lists. And the lists can contain further dictionaries like here, right? The guests. So the guest 1, let's say Helen, is a dictionary that is in an original list of guests, and I take it out of there and I put this dictionary in another list of guests that is within my dictionary that is a room, and this dictionary that represents the room is itself a member of a list of rooms. So this is a very complex data structure that you have there, but very, very common because data always work like this, right? That you have things that have different elements, and then you put them together, and then you make a list of them, and then this list perhaps is part of some other thing. If you think the parts of a car, for example, the wheel has different parts that are together in a kind of dictionary perhaps, and then each part itself is a dictionary of item number and, price or something like this. And then you have lists of these item numbers and prices. And the car has 4 wheels, so you have a list of 4 wheel dictionaries. And then the car itself is a dictionary that contains the list of the wheels and so on, right? So this is very common to have these nested data structures in reality. Now we want to show all the rooms we have and who is living in them. And this now you can do with a simple loop that you see here for R in room. So R just can be anything, right? I just call it R because it reminds me of room. Print found room R number. So now I don't want to call the room by some internal, number in the list. I want to call it by its room number. So this is why immediately the first thing I do is to get out the number of the room from this dictionary. So it will be 19 or 2 or 1. And then I say print in room R number, R staying. And this is a format string. So here you see that I have the brackets, the curly brackets that will evaluate are number. So in room 19 are staying, and now I go for P in R, and P is my variable in which I will put the person, this is why I call it P, in R, room, and then guests. And guests is within the room is the list of guests, right? This is the guests list. And so now for P in the list of guests means in every iteration, P will be one guest. Print P name. And if I go back to my guest, I see that every guest has a name. And so this will write me out all the guests who live in the room. Now let us execute this perhaps quickly to see what will happen. In room 19 are staying Andy, Peter, and then found room 201. In room 201 are staying Helen and Mary. Ignore the rest for a moment. Let's just look at this. Okay? It works. And now we want to have Peter depart. So just to show you how you remove something from there, room 1 guests. So the guests in room 1 equals guests 0. Why? Because my guests are Andy and Peter, right? In this room, I had guests 0 and 3, but now I want to have Peter depart, so only Andy is left. So then I override the guest entry with guests 0. So I put Andy as the only guest in the room. Now I additionally need to put a bracket around this because I need this to be a list. Guests has to be a list. It cannot be a single guest because else the program will complain when I try in other parts of the program to access it as a list. So a list that has one element must still be a list with one element. It cannot be just one element. Okay? It's like saying a bag in which I have, let's say, a chocolate is still a bag with a chocolate. And even if the chocolate goes away, it's still an empty bag. A bag with a chocolate is not the same as a chocolate, although I'm interested only in the chocolate, but formally the bag has to be there. And this is the case here. I need the list to still be there. Otherwise, reaching into the bag, which means indexing, the list, will fail with an error if I don't have a list. Therefore, I package it inside a list again. So now I have a list that has one element, is only one guest left, Andy. And then I print Peter left. And now I print again all the people who are in this list. And you see that now Peter has left. And in room 19 are staying Andy. And in room 201 are staying Helen and Mary. Okay? So, and you can see already, this is the beginning of a program that now would be relatively easy to expand. We should certainly write some functions because this is repeating now, right? Which rooms I have and who is in the rooms. I have to write it twice. You remember our principle, don't repeat yourself. So you should not write the same code twice. This should go in a function, print all guests and all rooms or something. And then you make this into a function that prints all guests. And also, deleting guests and adding guests should be functions. Thank you and see you in the next video. Bye-bye.